All right, welcome in. This is Rick from DFSOnDemand.com. With the Major League Baseball season right around the corner, I wanted to get out in front of it and talk a little bit about Major League Baseball, some general thoughts on how to beat MLB DFS and how to best get ready for this season. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. Again, a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about will be available on DFSOnDemand.com this season. Looking forward to a great Major League season. Okay, let's talk about volatility and predictability. So this is kind of a never-ending argument for Major League Baseball, and it pertains to how predictable the game is. You'll see most arguments take the stance that baseball is the most volatile sport, and I certainly agree with those arguments. And you'll also hear that baseball is the most predictable sport, and I also agree with those arguments. So how can it be both? Well, for the purpose of this video, let's kind of separate volatility and predictability. From a sheer results standpoint, baseball is extremely volatile. On any given night, the best player in the world can go 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. In fact, I'll show you this. What I'm looking at here is last season's game logs. So 2015, every game from every player last season, pitchers and hitters, it's over 55,000 games. This is available on DFSOnDemand.com if you want to download the spreadsheet. So here's Mike Trout. And this is sorted by Mike Trout, and this column here, AA, is his DraftKings scores, and AB is his Fanduel scores. And what you'll notice is that if you look through this, he averaged 9.6 DraftKings points per game last season. However, his range of outcomes were massive. And I'll just kind of highlight this here, this column, and you can see his range of outcomes were massive. He posted 20 plus DraftKings points 23 times, but he also scored 0 points 24 times. That's right. The best player in the league, and we'll go down here, we'll go down to the bottom. Here are his 0 games. The best player in the league by far scored exactly 0 points in 15% of his games. That will not happen in any sport. And remember, Trout is the best player in the league. Those numbers get much worse as you start expanding the sample size. So 50,000 games last year, or 55,000 games, or I'm sorry, hitters have 50,000 games. 15,000 of them were 0 or negative points. So 30% of all games played last year resulted in zeros. Failure is a large part of this sport, and it goes hand in hand with volatility. Now, on the other hand, baseball is rather predictable. It is, for the most part, an individual sport. It's one-on-one. It's one batter versus one pitcher. Hitters are barely reliant on any other factors outside of what they control. Not like the NFL. Think about it this way. In the NFL, a wide receiver, for example, is highly dependent on a million factors. How well his defender is covering him, how well his linemen are protecting his quarterback's ability to get him the ball. I mean, just a million things. That doesn't really exist in baseball. If you have a starter, you know he's likely to see 3 to 5 at-bats a game. You don't have to worry about someone stealing his touches like an NFL running back or somebody in the NBA. And there's just a ton of data to sift through. I mean, the game logs here is just a good example. I mean, there is a ton of data here, including Vegas lines, who was home and away, the results of the game, all of that information, and it gets deeper and deeper. Does a pitcher throw a lot of fastballs? Is there a batter on that opposing team that crushes fastballs? I mean, there's just a million ways you can slice this. So it is a rather predictable game as long as you understand that there is plenty of volatility involved, which means you have to have proper bankroll management and be ready and prepared for those swings. All right, so next I want to talk about something that's rather basic, but it's way overlooked, and that is the scoring and the roster positions for the sites that you're going to play on. So both DraftKings and FanDuel, the big two, have made changes to their baseball rules for this season. So be aware of this. Here is the DraftKings scoring. Now, this is actually they're going back and forth on this. This is not up to date. What they released before is that there is now going to be a utility position as opposed to 3 outfield positions. So they're going to get rid of one utility position or one outfield position and create a utility position. Other than that, the scoring stayed the same. You'll see a single is worth 3 points, a double 5, a triple 8, and a home run 2. When you compare that to FanDuel, again, FanDuel changed their scoring, but it's very similar. A single being 3 points, then 6, 9, and 12 for a double, triple, and home run. And what you'll see is that FanDuel is a much more proportionate scoring system. A double is worth twice as much as a single. A triple is worth 3 times as much as a single. That is not the case on DraftKings. So, for example, a 3 singles on DraftKings is worth more than 1 triple. On FanDuel, those would be worth the same thing. So those are small little, tiny little things to note, but they are worth noting because they are different across each site. FanDuel jacked up their pricing this year, basically just multiplied everything by 3, getting it closer to, or FanDuel jacked up their pricing, getting it closer to DraftKings. Now, you see everything is times 3. Last year, this was 1, 2, 3, and 4 for single, double, triple, home run. But FanDuel did get rid of negative points for outs. So last year, if one of your batters made an out, you were penalized for that. So that is no longer the case. You can kind of take those high upside guys that are going to strike out quite a bit, or maybe, like Ryan Howard, who's going to strike out or hit a home run. They're not nearly as penalized this year as they were last year. It's just really worth knowing, obviously knowing the scoring and the rosters like the back of your hand, because it is so often overlooked. I just, having an intimate knowledge of it is going to give you a leg up on your opponents. Talk a little strategy here, and in terms of hitters, let's talk about stacking. If you're unfamiliar, stacking is it's the act of taking multiple players from the same team and running them out there in the same lineup. For example, taking the top 4 hitters for the New York Yankees on a given night because you think they're in a good matchup. And the idea behind this is that baseball, while a very individual sport, it kind of takes multiple acts to be able to score a run. So rarely are runs scored simply by solo home runs. It takes a few offensive acts. Maybe a leadoff hitter walks and he's moved to second on a bunt or something similar, or he steals second base and then the next batter drives him in. It takes multiple players to combine to score 1 run. So if you are stacking multiple players from the same team, that's obviously a way for you to get a hit, a run, an RBI, all off 1 real run scored by that team. And you'll see why people do it. I mean, first of all, it's pretty lucrative. I don't have the numbers here, but our friends over at DFSGold.com, they broke it down last year. Something like 60% of all GPPs were being won with stacks. They didn't have the numbers on how many stacks were made. Were 80% of lineup stacks? I don't know, but it's a very lucrative strategy, and you can understand why. So this is a really great chart here, and this is last season based on the 2015 game logs. It is DraftKings points per game based on the spot in the lineup in which that player hit. So obviously you can see the top 4 batting orders produce the most fantasy points per game. It seems obvious, but a lot of people don't really buy into this, and they'll just kind of find anybody in the roster that fits. So I work really hard to get those top 4 or 5 batters, because you can see there's a significant drop off after that. These are the players that are going to get the most opportunity. The difference between getting 4 at-bats or 3 at-bats is obviously a huge difference in Major League Baseball. That's 1/3 of the production being cut off if you're only getting 3 at-bats. So, it's just a really good strategy to target players on the same team near the top of the order. Start there if you're new to Major League Baseball, and even if you're not, that is a way to get as much exposure to runs as possible. Okay, I'm going to move down to another chart here, and this is another thing I want to talk about, and this is top performers. So one thing I really like to look at is who could be the top scoring player each day. Obviously, having the highest scoring player on the slate is going to vault you up the leaderboards. I look for a lot of trends in what is similar between these players, and I'm just, first of all, I'm a big believer that stolen bases are, the key to GPP success. There are so few players who can steal bases at a high clip. Stolen bases don't take away from other statistics. In fact, they enhance most statistics. A hitter who walks and steals a base is worth 7 points, which is worth significantly more than a double. So that type of thing. So I digress. We can dig deeper on that later. But looking at last year's game logs, stolen bases are not a prerequisite for being the top performer on a slate. Looking at the highest scoring player across the day each day last season, there were only 8 instances where the top scorer stole multiple bases. On the flip side, there were 108 multi-home run games that ended up receiving top honors. So it might be a little indicative that home runs are much more likely in the sport than stolen bases, but the numbers certainly don't lie. Now, what I'm getting at here is with the changes to the roster on DraftKings, there is now a utility position, which means you can roster any hitter in that spot. It didn't exist last season. You're now going to be able to roster 2 first basemen, 2 catchers, etc., whatever, that you were not able to do. There'll be more creativity and flexibility. So with that being said, it's important to know how certain positions score against others. And again, this is logical, but seeing it on paper really stands out. DHs lead the way in terms of how many DraftKings points per game they score, while catchers bring up the rear. A lot of them tend to be quite defensive-minded. Maybe rostering 2 catchers is not in your best interest. The logical other high-scoring positions are the first base position, the third base position. Shortstop is a little thin. And, right field or the outfield positions in general tend to score pretty well. So, this is worth noting because this is going to open up a can of worms like we have not seen before with this utility position. You're now going to be able to handpick any player you want from any position to put into that utility spot, and it's really going to make a difference. So this is one thing that I am looking at pretty heavily for this season. All right, I want to wrap up with 2 more quick thoughts here. Quickly, we'll talk about pitchers. My only rule with pitchers here is that you have to get them right. It doesn't mean you have to take the most expensive pitchers, but you are going to be hard-pressed to find success if you choose the wrong pitchers. I say that because now they're the only position that can give you negative points. If a pitcher gets shelled early in the game, it can sink your entire lineup, force your hitters to dig you out of a hole. We already talked about how volatile hitting is, so that's the last place that we want to be reliant on. So looking at here are the game logs again for last year. 17% of all games, it's 849 games from pitchers resulted in negative points. So 17% of all games resulted in negative points. So you, again, have to get the pitchers right. Strikeouts are clearly, I'll scroll up here so you can see some of the top games of the season. Strikeouts are easily one of the best way to rack up fantasy points, and luckily they are one of the more predictable stats. Obviously, targeting pitchers with a high strikeouts per 9 is recommended when available. There were only 19 pitchers last season who averaged more than 9 strikeouts per 9 innings, while the league average hovered right around 7.5 strikeouts per 9. But pitchers tend to record strikeouts whether they are pitching well or not. Let's take Chris Sale, for example. He led the league last season with 11.82 strikeouts per 9, and he struck out 8 or more hitters in 18 of 31 starts. Really good numbers. But if you look at the games that he took a loss, he still averaged 11.9 strikeouts per 9. Those are what you would deem his worst starts of the year. He only had a half a strikeout more in his wins, so those would be considered his better games of the year. Obviously, there's more factors involved, but a nice split there. So you really just need to target pitchers with high strikeouts. On the flip side, teams either strike out a lot or they don't. The Astros and the Cubs last season, both playoff teams, both struck out at a massive rate. And what's good about it is that they still even striking out a ton and scoring a ton of runs because they were playoff teams. No matter how you slice the season, they were always near the top of the league in strikeouts. It was a consistent stat. You could bank on it all season long. Okay, let's see what else. Let's wrap up on one more thing here, and it pertains to weather. So if you are new to daily fantasy baseball, you need to be aware of the weather. Unfortunately, it's something that you cannot control. You're going to be seeing this face quite a bit. This is Kevin Roth. I have absolutely no affiliation with him other than he is, in my opinion, the best weather guy for DFS in the world. As far as I'm concerned, he's just the best in the business. Absolute must follow on Twitter. It's at Kevin Roth WX. Basically, what he'll do is he'll tweet out weather updates and radar images for the games that are likely to be impacted by weather. Usually if there's a 3-hour window of clear weather, the umpires will attempt to get the game in. That same kind of 3-hour rule applies to rain delays. Most umpiring crews won't wait longer than that for an opportunity to resume the game. Certainly not an exact science by any means, but something you should be taking into account and avoiding players or especially pitchers in that case in those games, because it's not uncommon for a starter to pitch 3 innings, have a rain delay, maybe it's a 90-minute rain delay, and he does not come back into the game. So certainly something to look at as opposed to bombing your entire lineup. Now, luckily, there are 7 teams that play in either a dome or have a retractable roof where weather won't be an issue. Those are Toronto, Arizona, Seattle, Milwaukee, Houston, Miami, and Tampa Bay, if I'm remembering all of them off the top of my head. So keep an eye on the weather. If you follow Kevin Roth, he will be a really nice resource for you. And I hope that DFSOnDemand.com will be another nice resource for you this season. I'm really excited to announce some of the great Major League Baseball packages that we're going to be doing for this year. It's going to be the first time we're ever going to do some sport-specific packages where we're going to have some really great tools. We asked you what you wanted. We're delivering on projections. We're delivering on player scoring calendars. So it's going to be a really exciting time for us. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe. Please like this video. Please tweet it. Whatever you can do to help keep us growing. And we hope to see you on DFS On Demand as a subscriber. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. It's on Twitter at DFS On Demand. And I'll talk to you soon. See ya.